Right. Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and today we're going to explore the requirements for the persuasive speech. Let's begin. All right, so first I want to go over the actual outline, and you'll notice some similarities, but some key differences as well. For our last speech, we did the informative speech, so it was pretty open-ended as far as the topics that we could cover. So for this one, we're going to sort of narrow our focus a little bit more, and we will explore societal organizational issues, and it will adhere to the Monroe's motivated sequence. So what's the Monroe's motivated sequence, you ask? Well, there's 5 steps. You'll see it here. So for example, we have getting attention. So we'll have our attention getter up here. Stating the need or showing the need, which is equivalent to showing the problem. Satisfaction or satisfying the need, so presenting a solution. Visualization, so this is where we incorporate hypothetical examples of the positive effects of implementing your solution or the negative effects of implementing your solution. And then the conclusion is the call to action. So remember, for the 5 steps of Monroe's motivated sequence, we have the attention getter or the attention, the need, satisfaction, visualization, and call to action. So let me explain a little bit further what this means as far as the construction of the actual speech. So we've been doing the attention getters for all the speeches, so you can do the same types of techniques. You start off with a question, factor, stat, hypothetical example. You can go ahead and do that. But then we also have the need. So when we talk about the need, we are explaining the problem in more detail, and we are creating a sense of urgency in the audience. So by creating a sense of urgency in the audience, we have to satisfy that need or satisfy that psychological tension that we create in our audience by explaining the problem with explaining the solution. Then with the visualization section, this is where we use a little bit of narrative, and we begin this section by saying, picture this or imagine this, and we go into our hypothetical examples. What would the world look like, or what would the situation look like if we implemented your solution? Or what are some of the bad things that could happen if we continue on a bad course? And then we have our call to action. And this is where you specify what you want the audience to do. So breaking down this outline into specifics, we have our teacher getter and we have our problem thesis statement. So remember, we shouldn't get scared with central ideas and thesis statements. It essentially just means that we're going to quickly say what the problem is and give a brief overview of what you're going to discuss. We also have ways of creating that psychological tension I just talked about with these 4 steps. You can use 1 through 4, a couple of them, so you don't have to use all 4 if you don't want to, but you do have to at least use 1 to describe the problem and for the detail. So for example, using additional facts or stats, providing clear explanations, discussing the cause and effects or harms that the problem creates, and or talk about how the problem directly affects the listeners. Now, one key difference between this speech and the formal speech, other than the format, is that we are partisan. So we are not in the role of teacher anymore, or we are not creating that objective lens anymore. We are creating a stance and stating our stance. But because we're doing that, we have to understand that there is a spectrum of acceptance with the audience. So we explored this in chapter 9. So some people in the audience might say, oh, okay, I totally agree. Some might be neutral because they might not know enough about the problem, or the problem might not affect them. And you might have people in the audience that outright reject what you're going to talk about or what you're talking about in your speech. So by making the objections, it's almost like that adage, you can attract more bees with honey than with vinegar. So instead of saying, well, you're wrong and you're stupid because you don't agree with me, you are saying that, hey, I understand where your objections come from, and you and the audience members that reject your proposition you might have shared values. We might think about those values or think about the problem in different ways. So acknowledging like, hey, I do understand where you're coming from as far as your objections, but here's why my plan, or here's why the problem is a problem or is dire, and then you need to reconsider your stance. So that's what that meaning of objections section is about. What are some objections that might be raised by that point of view? And then you're going to satisfy that need. So let's take a deeper dive into this. So you're going to state your solution to the problem and explain your proposal clearly. So unlike this 1 through 4, you do have to mention, and of course, just like the informative speech outline, everything's in full sentences. You're going to retain the outline format, and that's a given. However, you're going to, of course, include everything from A to D. Going to state your solution thesis statement. So, which is essentially what is that one sentence that says or sums up what your solution is, explain your proposal clearly, and talk about where has this worked before. So, for example, there's a technique in persuasive speaking called comparative advantage where you can talk about, well, we have these two solutions. Here are the pros and cons of this solution. So we're going to take that idea and we're going to think about, okay, what is a similar instance where our solutions worked before? So for example, if you are trying to change a policy at the university, we can look to other universities who implement your solution and say, hey, it has worked here. If you're trying to change a California law, okay, well, let's look to other states where the law is implemented and they're doing just fine. If you're trying to change a federal law, you can look to other countries to where, like, hey, this is where they implemented the law and everybody's doing fine. This is where it worked. So you're trying to figure out, hey, apples and apples, oranges and oranges, where has this worked before? But in the D part, you'll be meeting those objections as well. And you'll be like, hey, well, if we agree it's a problem, why would there be objections? Ha. For someone who's chronically aligned for academic purposes, one of the tendencies that I see with public discourse, whether it be on Instagram or TikTok or even YouTube, we might have different takes on a particular issue from different content creators. And some content creators agree that there's a problem going on, but they might have disagreements on how to tackle on an issue. So when those meeting objections section, that's what comes to mind. Especially, I was like, but especially with social media, we might have an agreement there's a problem, there's an issue, but each content creator has their different takes. So, like those content creators, there might be different takes within your audience. So, for example, you can say, hey, we understand this might not be the key or more favorable solution in your opinion, but this is why I think it is. So same idea. We're meeting those objections and we are talking about some of the, well, we're thinking about the audience member that might reject your proposal. Okay. Like I said before, we're visualizing the results. You want to make sure you kind of have all the steps included in the speech. So this might be a little bit tricky. So if you do have any questions about this section, please let me know. But essentially, we're creating a hypothetical example, like I said before, with the positives, negatives, or both. So when I say positives, what does the world look like, or what does the situation look like if we implement your solution? Or what are the bad things that can happen if we don't implement a solution? Or you can talk about both. So this is a hypothetical example. Picture this type of scenario. Then finally, we have the call to action. So unlike other speeches where the conclusion is only for recap and closing, this is the most important part of the speech with the sequence because all the steps that preceded, the main focus is to get the audience to act. So I'm not just persuading you to change your mind per se. What I'm urging you to do something about it. So say for instance, if we were in a class, right? One of the things that I do in my in-person classes is that I talk about animal rescue. I have two cats that I rescued myself from the shelter, and I'm really big on rescuing animals, donating to the shelters, making sure animals are safe, and what have you. Oftentimes, students in my class, maybe you guys included, have pets of your own or just really agree with animal advocacy and research and things like that. So I then asked my students, okay, well, since we're all on board, go ahead, I'm going to take out a basket and everybody can give me $100. Well, so you roll. Because you can't just pop up and ask for some $100 from students. People always look at me like, wait, are you crazy? What's going on? And of course, I'll say I will never ever hit anyone up for money. But I use that example by saying, yes, I can ask someone to act, but I cannot ask someone to do something that is not feasible, not ethical, or just something that someone can do at that moment. So instead of asking someone for $100 right off the bat, I can say, can you donate $1? Can you donate $5? Or just saying, or instead of just saying, hey, donate to me, here's the website that I can show where we can donate to the organization on your own. Or, hey, we'll have a drive for blankets and toys and all types of animal supplies so we can donate to the shelter. So, in other words, when you have that call to action, it has to be specific and doable. So, for example, you can ask the audience to donate. You can ask, hey, can you sign the petition? You can show through visual aid, hey, this is what this looks like. Now, for an online class, it's a little bit trickier with visual aids, and I'm a little bit more lenient with visual aids just because sharing the screen, and I do this with Screencast-O-Matic. Some of us might use the PowerPoint tool to do that, and that's fine. But if it is a little bit more difficult to do like a screen sharing, screencasting type of tool, that's totally understandable. Say, for instance, if you create a mock petition and you print it out and show me, or just any object that relates to your speech, and that relates to your speech topic, that'll be fine as well. But those are just some ideas for the call to action. Make sure it's specific and doable. And then you have the concluding statement. That's about it for the actual speech format. If you decide to create a YouTube link, you can put the link underneath or just put it in the comment box, or you can put it in the comment box or put it on top of the outlines just so I can find it. So I want to make sure to find it, or you can do a video recording or video upload via Canvas. So let me show you where all this is at. So under speech specifics, you'll find the speech assignment. I'm going to move myself around a little bit. So this is the longest speech we're going to be doing in this class. And you're going to be speaking for 6 to 8 minutes. So just make sure you adhere to that particular section. Then you have the outline that I just showed you. You can use 3 to 5 sources. You can use more sources if you like, but you can't use less. So make sure to incorporate those sources in APA format. Like I said before, you're going to use at least one visual aid to support your information. This can include pictures, slides, objects. I know it's a little bit tricky with us being online. I've seen several students do screencasting like I'm doing right now. Sometimes people have a TV in the back and they're flipping their slides that way. They might just have the object or screencast. Say, for instance, I mentioned donation, so kind of screencast what that looks like as a visual aid and a call to action. It's up to you, but do something that's easy for you. Some of us might have an object. So, say, for instance, we're talking about using reusable water bottles, like this one right here. So, as I talk about why we should switch from plastic water bottles to reusable water bottles, we can go ahead and use the object, and boom, that will act as your visual aid. So do what's easiest for you, but let me know if you have any questions. One note I do want to talk about for the actual topic itself. So like I said before, it's not as open-ended as the informative speech. However, we have to approach it a different way because we're talking about societal and social issues, which fits in the rules motivated sequence. Make sure it's not what I call preference speech. A preference speech is fun. So, for example, Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. Although we all know that Coca-Cola is the superior product. Just saying, I drink Pepsi too. But I also have to think about, yeah, well, it's Pepsi versus Coca-Cola debate. Although a fun debate, is that really a societal issue? Not really. But what could be a societal issue? I can talk about the dangers of pop or soda consumption and how we need to reduce it. I can talk about plastic. This is a plastic, but plastic waste from pop or soda bottles. I can talk about, hey, should we tax soda or pop just as we would alcoholic beverages to discourage people from drinking it or to fund health programs. Now, those are related topics, but they're more geared towards societal issues. So just something to think about. But of course, if you have any questions, any concerns, please let me know. So, excuse me. Let me go right here. I'll also use a rubric to help grade and give feedback. If you have any questions about my comments and feedback via the rubric, let me know. So this is where you're going to submit the outline here. So they're going to give me that message because I'm a test student, but if you do have any issues, let me know as well. It's just going to look like that. However, you're going to upload your outline. Like I said before, just make sure if you do use a YouTube link, you can copy and paste it on the outline. You can put it in the comment box. Let me go back to this one. Let's see. Submit assignment. You can use media, upload your media. There's several ways to get it to me. But if I can't, say for instance, if I can't look at the YouTube video or if there's some issues with the file, then I'll let you know. If there are any issues, there'll be like a temporary zero. So for instance, I might say, oh, it's a temporary zero. Please give me the file and give me the corrected version, and then I'll update that grade. Okay. We have examples of quality speeches as well. And that's about it. We do have our speech reflection paper too, so I'll go ahead and talk about that real quick. This is the last reflection paper assignment for the semester. And I just wanted to get your feedback on your speech performance, what you want to improve on, how do you plan on improving your speech performance? Did you have any other opportunities to speak in public in other classes or in other contexts? This is an either or question. So either you answer this one, or if you didn't get the opportunity to speak in public, how will you use these techniques in future courses? How do you feel about public speaking, even though we did do online public speaking? How do you feel about it now versus the beginning of the semester? And how will you apply this to your future career? Okay. So pretty much that is it for the persuasive speech. So this is the third speech. I really enjoyed looking at and listening to your informative speeches. I do look forward to listening to your persuasive speeches. When you're thinking about a topic, just like for the informative speech, think about a social societal issue that you care about that affects you and your community. And of course, let me know if you have any questions. I look forward to listening to your speeches, reading your outlines, and thank you so much for joining me in the class this semester. We have one more speech before we do end though, so look for a video later on about the narrative speech. It's a little bit shorter, about 2 to 4 minutes, but you can think about a story that you want to tell that involves a life lesson that you learned. So that's the last speech that we'll do. That's coming up in the next couple of weeks. All right, thank you so much. All right, talk to you later. Bye.